Over to you, Dr. Kola.
Okay, thank you, Marachi. Good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues, depending on where you are listening to us. I would like to use this opportunity to welcome you to an important discussion around what is happening globally, especially with regards to the amendments of the IHR, that's International Regulation of 2005, and of course, around what is happening in the area of pandemic agreements. So now I believe that this is going to provide us with a unique opportunity to better understand what has happened in the recent times regarding these amendments. On this call, before we proceed, I have some of the panelists who are seasoned experts who have actually worked in different capacities with regards to the implementation of IHR, supporting the countries in the area of IHR implementations over the years. And as we start, of course, we are going to be hearing from them to share their experience, of course, to give us an insight into what is really happening around the amendments, the new amendments made to the international air regulation in 2014. So on the call, before we start, I would like to quickly introduce them. On the call, we have Dr. Anderson, who is a staff of the WHO working within the African region, and is going to be also sharing his experience. He's also a seasoned expert. I also have Pearl Kubuyenge. She has also been supporting. Dr. Anderson, you are welcome. Pearl has also been supporting different areas of an international negotiation body and also the IHR areas. And of course, on the call, we have Michael Ajabeng, who is working with African Regional Office and is very, very experienced and seasoned, especially he has worked across different administrative levels in the country. And of course, he's going to be giving us the background and of course, put more insights into these amendments. So those are the panelists that will be speaking to us on this call. And please, I want us to be very attentive because they have a lot of experience and insights to share when it comes to this area. And I believe that this is what we have been looking out for, to see what are these current amendments. And this is an opportunity for us to better understand what has changed. Before we start, Amarachi, before we start, you are going to share with us the housekeeping rules. But before that, I want us to know that this virtual meeting adheres to the code of conduct to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment and abuse, as well as exploitation. Please, let's take note of that. Thank you very much. Amarachi, thank you. So I want us to pay attention to these few housekeeping rules. To start with, we expect all participants to have access to the show captions Q&A feature. That's question and answer feature on your screen. The chats, reactions, as well as the raise hand button. Those features are there just below your screen. As you can see them, show captions, Q&A, those one in the dark highlights. Then if you wish to take the floor, please kindly raise your hand and the moderator will invite you to talk. We also expect you to activate your microphone when you want to take the floor. Please, these are very, very important information you have to take note of before we start. Again, we expect you to use the Q&A feature on your screen for questions regarding the topic and presentations. Only questions in the Q&A will be answered during the sessions. And we expect that the responses may occur live during the event or be replied to you privately or publicly for the benefit of other attendees. This is very important. You can also use the chat feature for general introductions and of course questions regarding IT or logistics. So the chat feature is not meant for, it's just for general introduction and questions regarding the IT or logistics, but not for the Q&A component. The chat may also be used. So for the chat may also be used by the presenters to share important links, contact information, and of course, and so on and so forth. Next slide. For the interpretation in English, French, or Portuguese, we have them available. So what you need to do is for you to click the interpretation button, which you have at the bottom next to pose. Click on interpretation and choose the language that you would like to hear. To hear the interpreted language only, click mute original audio. Okay, so you can really play around this. Notes, the interpretation of proceedings serves to facilitate communication and does not constitute an authentic or verbatim record of the proceedings. Only the original speech is authentic. Please, so you can play around the interpretation to select the preferred language of your choice. So you can also click on show captions feature, and caption will appear on the screen. To close the caption, please, you can also click on the hide captions. Okay, so these are important features within this on your screen. So for the recording materials and feedback, kindly note that by participating in this meeting, whether as participants or panelists, we take your attendance as permission to record your contributions, as well as share the recordings via various channels for continuous learning processes. Because for this meeting, we are going to record the proceedings of this meeting. For the session materials, including session recordings, it will be shared with the participants in the days following the webinar, so that you're also able to go through them to foster your understanding of the entire topic. So quickly, we have gone through the housekeeping rule, and of course, for this agenda, we are going to be looking through the purpose of the meeting, as well as the objectives and expected outcomes from participants. So next is we want to really go through what IHR 2005 tells us. What is the, what are the concepts there? I believe that as IHR NFPs, we are all comfortable with most of the articles and other related annexes and contents of the IHR 2005. Then we move to IHR monitoring and evaluation to really understand what this really means. And again, we proceed to the progress of IHR implementation, of course, in the region. And we also, the next on the agenda is the overview of the 2024 IHR amendments and the next steps. We're also going to touch on the progress of the pandemic treaty negotiations, which I believe will interest most of us. And towards the end, we take questions and answers, and we close the meeting. And of course, before closing the meeting, we'll discuss around the next steps moving forward. But please, I want to repeat from what I've discussed earlier that after each presentation or during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to actually put it inside the Q&A feature. And of course, you might still be able to take some of those presentations if you, when you raise your hand during the Q&A session. Please take note of all these important guidance. So welcome everyone once again to this important meeting, and I believe it's going to be a fruitful one. It's going to be informative. And on this note, I would like us to start this meeting. Let's begin, please. Amarachi is also going to be part of this important discourse. She's our IT person, and she's going to be, supporting us very closely in some of these presentations and of course the discussions. Amarachi works with WHO, and of course, she's a staff of WHO too in the African region, and she's been very supportive in the build-up of this webinar. Amarachi, thank you. So can we start? We are going to start the first presentation on international regulations 2005, and as well as the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework for enhancing global security. So to kickstart this meeting, I would like to call on the first presenter who would have introduced before, in the person of Dr. Michael Ajabeng, who is a seasoned expert in this area, to give us the background of IHR and as well as IHRMF for enhancing global security. Dr. Michael, on this note, I would like to hand over to you to start the presentation. Over to you, Dr. Michael.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kola, and good day to colleagues across the Afro region and colleagues who have also joined from elsewhere. We're just glad to be here today, basically to share with you Our main focus, probably I would say, is to do with what is happening in the front of the IHR amendments and what is expected of us countries. But we can't just do that without delving once again into what IHR is, where we've got into so far as implementation is concerned. And then I would say the twin sister of IHR, there's something to do with the pandemic treaty. It's not concluded, but then it's work ongoing. I want to believe before we end this deck of slides, we would all have come to speed with what all these things are. So we'll basically be walking through this outline. But for starters, we should know that the world is now a global village. I cannot belabor this point well enough. And any infected person anywhere can easily appear anywhere using just lay language here. Someone may also say, if there is a person who sneezes in New Zealand, somebody in Greenland may catch a cold. These are all very true. The COVID-19 really attested to some of these statements I've just made, and then we need to be up to the billing so far as early detection, response, and all that to do with assuring global health security is concerned. One time DG of WHO just put it right when she said, when the world is collectively at risk, defense becomes a shared responsibility of all nations. We are secured as the weakest prepared country so far as global health security is concerned. And in terms of travel, let me also add that travel contributes a lot. During the 1918 pandemic, Spanish flu, it took such a long time for other areas, other corners of the globe to also have the infection, all because of the time it took for one to travel to those areas. So in this modern day of jet travel, some are even now thinking of supersonic traveling. And so will the speed of transmission or the threat of transmission also increase from place to place. There's been re-emergence of diseases. We've continuously been plagued by a lot of public health threats. Afro region alone does record well around 100 public health events, with about 90% of them being infectious diseases. It means we need to be up to the task. We need to have the necessary structures to be able to effectively manage all these public health threats. And it has other ramifications. It's not only individuals getting ill, but then we are talking of it affecting economies, affecting securities, and because of that, nations are always concerned. Some years back, we had what was called the International Sanitary Conferences, which were held all the way from the 1851s to 1938. And these annually turn out what we called the International Sanitary Conventions. But come 1948, WHO came into existence, and it's also changed the game that was being played at the time. So the next conference that was held in 1951, through WHO, and if I say WHO, all the member states involved, adopted the International Sanitary Regulations for the first time. So it moved away from it being convention to it now being what? International Sanitary Regulations. That is in 1951. But in 1969, there was a conscious attempt to move away from a theory which understood disease causation to be caused by insanitary conditions, to embody all aspects of disease causation. And that's why we had in 1969 the International Health Regulations. It has evolved from time to time to up to what we see now. It used to be a yellow book in 1969. Come 1981, smallpox was eradicated. They saw the need to revise it. From 1995 to 2005, there were emerging and re-emerging diseases. Again, global community saw the need for it to be revised. 2014, that was when, that's one example of it. In 2014, we got to establish the fact that yellow fever vaccination, for instance, may be valid for life once it's administered and not necessarily 10 years. These are some of the amendments that went to the 2014 regulations. And in 2022, there was another one, which is also quite significant, that is talking about the period when an amendment comes into force, the period that countries or state parties are supposed to use in making sure that it's enforced in country. It used to be 2 years. It was reduced in 1922 to just 1 year. But in 2024, a lot also happened, largely attributed to the COVID pandemic. Systems were shaking, weaknesses were identified, and it's only good that we continue adapting or amending the regulations to address the needs of the time. So this is what we have now, and things might change by September 2025. However, in terms of what's in existence, we can always look at this cover with the green edges as the most current. IHR provides a framework for collective management of health threats. The main goal is ensuring maximum global health security while minimizing interference with international travel or traffic and trade. This is so important because if you don't give this assurance, if the framework does not give this assurance, I can bet you may not have the cooperation of countries in ensuring international global health security. Some critics definitely may abound as to the use or the importance of the international health regulations. If one wants to take that tangent, the only question I can pose is, can we imagine a world without any regulations, any framework? If we're able to answer that, then probably the importance of international health regulations, in whatever form that it is, may come to the forefront as quite important. One thing about the IHR is containment at source, which is a key principle in IHR. Gone are the days when diseases are detected at borders and we get to know it's emanating from a neighboring country. You want to attribute that case to that country. We've moved beyond that. It's now looking at when you detect any event, even at your borders, you are thinking of where did it emanate from, so that together the two countries, the two nations, even if it involves 3 or 4 nations, you try to address the source of the outbreak together and not addressing it in piecemeals. And we have the capacities to guide us. Some of you may be very familiar with these, but they are very, very important. Each has its unique role to play. The core capacities, the various levels that these capacities could be implemented, the potential hazards that we are all driving at, the biological, it could be infectious, zoonotic, food safety, chemical, and then radionuclide. The points of entry, because of cross-border transmission, is also one area of interest to all of us. Let's look at this critically. Some of the key articles that are embedded in the IHR 2005 as we speak. Just allow me to kindly walk through with you. I know this regulation reading it may be a bit cumbersome, but then we are just giving you the insight so that after this webinar, this is one document that will always lie very close to you. Article 4 talks about designation of the national focal point, which shall be accessible 24/7. And for me, if I see 24/7, what it means is that if you call me anytime, any odd hour, I shouldn't feel offended. I need to, if I wasn't there to respond, as soon as I see your call, I need to call back. Same, I can also reach out from anywhere to any national focal point, and they should be accessible. That is the spirit behind the 24/7. And it's up to the country to ensure that capacities to detect, assess, notify, and report public health emergencies are strengthened. And I'm sure those of us very conversant with IDSR may know that these are the same core functions in there that we work with. Notification is also one thing. That is the use of the decision instrument to now establish whether there's the need to notify WHO or not. And subsequently updating WHO timely where there are any updates. 7 tells us the state's party or obligation to share information if having unexpected, unusual event. And colleagues, these are things that WHO did not impose on any member state. These are things that member states have met at the World Health Assembly, and together we've agreed that these are the things that we want to do. That is why in IHR, when we are referring to some of the articles, we usually use the connotation of the term states parties, because these countries are party to an agreement. And it's not like any country imposing its will on another. So if you begin to understand that it's not an imposition, but it's something that our states are party to, then the message begins to become clearer as to what is expected of us. So Article 8 is looking at state party. If there's inadequate information or not sure of response, there's a very huge room for consultation with WHO. So don't never say, I want to ensure I'm done with what I'm dealing with. I'm done with what I'm investigating before I inform WHO. No, the articles or the IHR enjoins us to share such information with WHO, even whilst investigation is going on. There are other reports that in the event that countries are not able to support WHO with, or provide WHO with, WHO may ask an NGO, for instance, in that country, that we've heard there's a cholera outbreak in your country. How true is it? And that NGO's report, WHO will have to now use it and share with other states for the sake of what? International health security. And this is something that the IHR enjoins WHO or specifies that WHO can do on behalf of countries. Or we can even ask a neighboring country what is happening. These are the other reports that we are talking about. There are also some other reports that definitely WHO will come to you for verification. We've done that a couple of times. These days, with a lot of disinformation, misinformation going about in social media circles, you may see a news article saying country A has banned travel from country B because there's an outbreak in country B. Most of the time you follow up and it is not the case. This forms part of our verification. Not quite long ago, there was there's even is still ongoing, an outbreak where cases that were being reported in other countries somehow had a connection or a link with a particular country. And that particular country had not reported any case. So we had to send a verification request with all the evidence that we've gotten to that country to ensure that they also verify their reports. I'm just giving you some of the insights that go into verification. So these are some of the things. And as soon as the country receives that report, it's expected that the country will provide WHO at least acknowledging receipt of the report within 24 hours, and then going further to provide the relevant information as soon as possible. There's also an article to do with response. What we've basically done through these key articles is that going through the detection, going through investigation, going through notification, going through response. So these are so key and crucial, and you see them being reflected in the various articles. Article 14 looks at WHO to cooperate with other intergovernmental or international organizations. If you, God forbid, if there is any nuclear leakage or disaster anywhere, I believe WHO is well positioned to link up with the International Atomic Commission, Energy Commission, to respond to these events better than the country. So this is where WHO will have to come in with that technical support and cooperate with other intergovernmental international organizations who are all in the health space. And then points of entry, those that the country seems or deems fit to designate to ensure that IHR is implemented to the letter. It does so, and then informs the global community as such. Additional areas of interest that got to do with these IHR: unjustified restrictions of travel or trade during outbreaks can have massive economic impact. And that is one key thing that the IHR seeks to preach, for want of a better word. And Article 43 states that should implement health measures that restrict international health traffic for more than 24 hours. These countries that have put in this measure, they are obliged to report to WHO the public health rationale within 48 hours. And it used to be very, very rampant without any public health justification. But this day and age, we see that coming down. Because once the country does that, it has to provide public health justification to WHO, and there has to be an agreement. Other than that, it becomes something that the IHR frowns upon. So unjustified restriction is one problem that IHR wishes to avert, and this has the dispositions to truncate information sharing between countries. If I share information and because of that, you are going to restrict travel to and from my country, I'm not going to do that because it has economic implications. So there should be pure public health justifications before such is done. People keep asking this question: are there any punitive measures for any country that violates IHR? It's a genuine question, but the response is, for international treaties, mostly there is no punitive measure for anyone who violates any of the codes in there. What we count upon is the peer pressure, the diplomatic environment for people to fall in line or for countries to fall in line in its implementation. Aside assuring international health security and at the same time making sure that there is no restriction on travel and trade, another hallmark of IHR is to identify a public health emergency of international concern soon as it occurs. Colleagues, I didn't say public health event of international concern. Public health emergency of international concern. And why? We are all afraid of the next big bang in terms of a pandemic, in terms of a disease that may wipe off a lot of people from the surface of the earth. We are all afraid. And where it will come from, nobody knows. So we should be on our toes, and the IHR is there to support us in that direction. It can be a very small event. At best, you can call it an outbreak. That would be of national concern. But there are others that when we apply the decision instrument, aka Annex 2, then it falls in the realms of what a public health emergency of international concern. So the criteria for a public health emergency of international concern is it should have the propensity for international spread or the likelihood for international spread. And then secondly, we may call for 2 or more countries to ensure a coordinated international response. So when you have these 2 ingredients coming together, you should start seeing public health emergency of international concern in the world. But for you to arrive at that destination, that is where we use the decision instrument. Indeed, a couple of declarations have been made since 2009. The current one that we are in is the smallpox. We are also in polio, unknown to many. Polio is still a public health emergency of international concern that we are contending with after some viruses emanating from the same lineage were found dotted across various continents. So this is the decision instrument. AFRO, that is WHO AFRO, decided that we are going to use the IDSR to roll out our IHR below the subnational level. So if we go to our regions, some may call it provinces, our counties or districts, depending on where you are, you observe that you wouldn't see IHR a lot written black and white. It's all because we have the IDSR, which shares the same core functions, the same aspirations with IHR, to roll out so that there is no confusion and there's no parallel systems running. And this has worked so far. And what is the importance of these 2? First of all, if you want to see the linkage very well between IDSR and IHR, after you've strengthened those core functions, the detection or identification, the notification, followed by investigation and response, all that, it comes to a point where you ask yourself, is it a fake or not? Because it has propensity for international spread, and also call for international coordinated response. I mentioned these two. So what happens here is you use the decision instrument, which is Annex 2. For using the Annex 2, there are 4 conditions. That is smallpox, polio from wild-type poliovirus, human influenza caused by new subtype, or SARS. As soon as you have these 4, you notify WHO that you are having a potential fake, because the actual declaration of fake is done by the DG with the support of what? The emergency committee. They advise the DG on that status, although the DG ultimately has the prerogative to announce a fake or otherwise. Most of the times, you hear people say, when these 4 are met, you don't use the decision instrument, you report as a fake. Please, these 4 are embedded in the decision instrument, and the decision not to go through the 4 criteria will be moving through next is all part of the decision instrument. So when you identify these 4 and you report as a fake, the potential fake for that matter is still what? The use of the decision instrument. Aside these 4, there are others that we will now have to go through some 4 questions. Is the public health impact serious? Is the event unusual or unexpected? Is there a significant risk of international spread? Is there any significant risk of international travel or trade restrictions? Colleagues, once again, there is no hard and fast rule as to what should let you respond a yes or no. But what we seek from you, if you say a no, you need to provide a justification for saying the no, and a public health justification for that matter. If you say a yes, you still have to provide that justification. Because of time, I'll use just one as an example. Is the public health impact of the event serious? For us to say a yes is not, it's not subjective feeling. No, we need to look at what is on the ground, the testament, the evidence on the ground, the number of cases. Is it unusual? The type of, the virulence, the type of agent. Is it something known to us? Are health workers involved? Some of these things may help us to decide whether the event is serious, the fatality rates, the burden, and all that, help us arrive at an answer whether it is yes or no. But then the most important thing is we give a response. If you look at the guidelines, you may have about 4 leading questions helping us to answer a yes or no. As soon as you answer yes to just one of them, it means the question is the public health impact of the event serious is definitely a yes. So we go through that motion for public health event being serious, unexpected, significant risks, and whether there is significant risks of international travel or trade. Moving through the algorithm, we quickly arrive at the place where we say we notify WHO, all because 2 out of the 4 criteria specified, we've answered yes. If maybe we've gotten only just one saying yes, we can still inform WHO that this is what we are observing, consultation ongoing, and the WHO will be more than glad to continue working with you on that. We have the IHR National Focal Point, currently as the key institution implementing IHR at the various, in the various countries. These work with all the agencies, and here some may present as the steering committee, some may present as National Public Health Institute with all the relevant agencies in there. It differs a bit from country to country, but all we are saying is the National IHR Focal Point is not a person, it's not an individual, but rather an institution that works with the IHR contact point, which is at the regional level. Between the National IHR Focal Point, which is an institution, and the IHR contact point, which is also an institution and at the regional level, in our case in Brazzaville, we may call for verification of events, which I explained earlier, and the IHR National Focal Point will also notify the contact point in AFRO of any event that may come to his notice, provide reports, and things that are not clear, definitely consultations may be ongoing. I would like to show this operational framework as a one-stop shop for understanding how IHR operates. And I've done a bit of work, that is those below here, the 24/7. But let me just move to the top, where we have now the WHO IHR contact point interacting with headquarters, where we have the Director General. This is where all our efforts will culminate into the declaration of a fake or otherwise. And the WHO Director General works with a pool of experts. From time to time, WHO sends a call for experts to send their CVs for enrollment into the pool.
Try and wrap up.
Okay, and from this pool, we have the emergency committee and we have the review committee. The review committee helps to look at public health emergencies. Sorry, the review committee helps to look at the operationalization of the regulations itself, whether it is well suited or it needs to have some amendments made, whilst the emergency committee supports the DG in reviewing the public health emergencies. The DG will come out with standing recommendations for ongoing emergencies, ongoing issues, whereas we have temporary recommendations for emergencies that need to be looked at. For considerations, we need to have collective capacity to make sure that one country cannot say I'm more prepared than the other, because you are as good as the weakest country. That is why we continue to advocate that all countries should put in their best. Consideration for IHR implementations, look at the key functions, same as IDSR. Is you also look at strengthening IDSR to implement IHR. So I'm concluding, IHR is legally a binding document. We're going to further explore what the 24 amendments brings on board and what is expected of countries to do when it comes to domestication for the full implementation come September 2025. I'll say, let's ensure maximum public health security whilst minimizing interference with international traffic and trade. Health security is very achievable. And for us in the Afro region, let's not forget about IDSR, even in the implementation of our IHR. On that note, I would like to hand over to moderator. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Michael, for that very enlightening presentation. Thank you so much. And I believe that we've heard from him, looking at the evolution of the IHR, as well as different articles, very important articles, which we expect to also go back and read through again, even though we are all experts in these areas. And of course, the need for countries to build their capacities in those different 15 areas that he has also mentioned. I think this is very, very important. As designated INFP in our respective countries, there is need for us to ensure that we prioritize notification and reporting, of course, as well as information sharing, very, very critical. So thank you, Dr. Michael, again. As you know, you can see on the slide that there is need for us to ensure maximum public health security while minimizing interference within international traffic. So again, if you have any questions with regards to the presentation that I just made, please let's make use of the Q&A feature on your screen. And of course, we are going to be responding to that as we proceed with the presentation. So I think we can take the presentation at the end of the whole session because of time. So we are going to move to the next presentation, which has to do with the introduction to the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework. He has already described to us what the basic, the nitty-gritty of IHR in terms of the evolution. So for this particular one, I'm going to be responsible for this presentation, and I will quickly take you through, even though Michael has taken part of my own time already as part of his own slot. So I'm going to summarize. So quickly, next slide, please. So thank you. Before 2016, you know, as part of the conscious efforts of the global community to ensure that countries are adequately prepared for emergencies, there were recommendations of the Review Committee on Second Extensions for establishing national public health capacities and on IHR implementation. And some of these recommendations are based on observations over time. Like Dr. Michael rightly said, that there have been a lot of deliberate efforts to improve on the different regulations that have been in existence. And the first part of that recommendation is for the Secretariat to develop the new monitoring and evaluation scheme. We are going to be seeing what was in existence before this recommendation, so that we are able to objectively monitor and evaluate the current capacities in the countries. That's the first one. The second one has to do with the need for the state parties to urgently strengthen the current self-assessment system. Because before 2016, what we used to have was the self-evaluation in form of questionnaire, whereby the country on an annual basis submits to the secretariat, IHR secretariat, on their capacities across the different core areas. And also, they need to implement an in-depth reviews of significant disease outbreaks and public health events. This was also recommended. And of course, the secretariats should develop options to move from exclusive self-evaluation to approaches that combine self-evaluation, peer review, and also the voluntary external evaluations, involving a combination of a domestic and independent experts. I'm going to speak to this as I proceed with this presentation. All these recommendations, they were adopted during the 68th World Health Assembly in May 2015. We can all remember what happened during Ebola crisis that we had from 2014 to 2016. And this actually also was part of what informed this recommendation, so that we're able to critically and objectively assess ourselves to know the true status of our preparedness with regards to those areas of capacities. Can I see the screen now? I'm trying to see the screen. A moment, please. I'm just trying to, sorry, one moment. My screen has okay, then thank you. I don't know what happened to the screen. So let me just continue with the presentation. So quickly, let's go through the principles of the components of the IHR MEF. Like I said, it's a way of trying to evaluate our system to see how we're actually progressing with the implementation of all those core capacities. So basically, we have 4 components of IHR monitoring and evaluation framework, starting from self-evaluation, that's self-assessment and reporting, and external evaluations, and of course, after action review and simulation exercises. In carrying out these functions, they are actually guided by core principles of transparency, that everything that we are doing, we are not working in silos, that objectively, we are able to actually see what is happening in the global community. Secondly, of course, we want to ensure mutual accountability, trust building, appreciation of the benefits of this important framework, and of course, dialogue and sustainability. So it comes with a lot of dialogue, a lot of participation across different member states. So this is very important. So quickly, let's look at each of these core capacities, each of these components of the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework, starting with, go back to the last slide, please. Last slide. Let me start with the SPA. That's the self-assessments and reporting. This is expected to be done on an annual basis, and it focuses on functionality. It's a quantitative annual assessment to monitor the progress towards the full implementation of the IHR. That is one. Like I said, this is the only component of this framework that is mandatory and is done on an annual basis. And we are expecting the countries to submit the report for the last year. I think this is an important opportunity for me to also remind the countries that have not submitted their SPA to please do the needful. I know that the majority of the countries have submitted. Then the second part of this framework is the external evaluation in form of joint external evaluation, which focuses also on capacity. And of course, it is voluntary. And countries are expected to actually deliver on this or conduct this review every 4 to 5 years. And recently, in the last 1 year, we have been able to have these evaluations conducted in different countries. There are still some few countries that are yet to conduct this evaluation. And it also evaluates IHR implementation. The after-action review is also there, and the simulation exercise, which are also which focuses on the functionality of this of your capacities of your the existing capacity in the country. They are both voluntary, just like the JEE. And for the after-action review, this is what to do at the end of an emergency when you have declared an outbreak over or any kind of emergency over, to take stock of what went well and what went less well, so that you are able to develop an improvement plan, which, when implemented, can also contribute to improve health security in your respective countries. And last but not the least is the simulation exercise, which is usually done before you have an emergency as a way of testing your capacities to know exactly where the gaps are and what you can quickly put in place to address the low-hanging fruit and improve on the existing system. And like I said, it evaluates a non-real event before you have a major event. Next slide. Next slide, please. So looking at I'm sure some of us are familiar with the concept with the EPR, Emergency Preparedness and Response Cycle, which actually which states what should happen at different times of the cycle. Before you have an emergency, what are you supposed to be doing before an emergency in terms of having simulation exercises from time to time to test your core capacities, and of course the existing plans. And you are supposed to be submitting your SPA, that's the state party annual reporting. And of course, when you are doing that, development of different plans in the country and organizing the entire system, training of your workforce, and of course, equipping your existing infrastructure before an emergency, which you are expected to put into use when you have an emergency. And of course, I've mentioned the CMEX. At the end of the day, when you have an emergency, the expectation is that you are supposed to respond, leveraging existing capacity, the resources, both human, financial, and of course, the material resources that you have in the country to be able to respond to this emergency. And as you are responding, of course, at the point in time you want to declare the outbreak over, especially when you have totally controlled the outbreak. So when this is done, whether you have done whether during your simulation exercises, which was what was supposed to happen during your preparedness, or after your after-action review, to look at what you have done well or what areas will still require improvement, you are supposed to actually come up with an improvement plan or action plan that is supposed to be implemented. And those action plans, we want to encourage countries, based on the experience that we have seen, we have gathered from different countries, to ensure swift implementation of these plans, because it's not something that I want to put in the shelf. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that we strengthen the health security of the country. And in doing so, we have developed, of course, from the African region, different tools that we can use as trackers to monitor the implementation of this improvement plan. I think this is something that I believe that some of us should begin to prioritize, not just by conducting an after-action review or simulation exercise. Even the JE that you have conducted, it is time that we began to look at those key elements that we think should be implemented through joint meetings with partners and mobilization of resources to implement them, so that in the next 5 years, we would have improved our scores, we would have improved in the different area of our IHR core capacities. Next slide, please. So you can see this infographics looking at what we should be doing as countries before we have an outbreak, before the public health outbreak occurs, or what we should be doing during and what we'll be doing after. So if you look at the first part of this particular infographics where you have simulation exercise, you can see that this is something that you are supposed to actually continuously do with progressive progressively with more complex exercises. So you start from the lowest part, the one that is least stressful, like the tabletop exercises, and you move on to, of course, the drills. You look at the functional exercises, and of course, you want to also implement or conduct a full-scale exercise to really test your system. Okay, this is before the exercise. And of course, African region, just to remind us again, of course, we are really doing well in this area. The only area that we need to improve on is the implementation of those corrective actions that we normally develop after this exercise. Then, by the time you have an outbreak and you have activated your incident management systems within the EOC, I think what we are now recommending, because we have to look at what has been happening over the years. What should we do differently? We have been doing a lot of after-action review, interaction review, and of course, we're also now trying to prioritize that what to do at the beginning of the event within the first 2 weeks of responding to outbreak. So we strongly recommend that moving forwards, when you have an outbreak within the first 2 weeks, we expect the incident management incident management system, of course, those pillar leads, those people that have been working in the area of different operation areas, to sit back and quickly take stock of what has happened within the first 2 weeks of responding to outbreak. And as such, we strongly recommend that we begin to practice or implement EAR, which is early after-action review, which enables us to look at the continuum of what happens within the first 7 days in terms of detection, what happens within 1 day after detections in terms of notification, and of course, what happens within the first 7 days stay in terms of what are the response measures that we are able to put in place, so that we can identify gaps across this continuum to see what areas can we quickly improve on and implement. And with this, we believe that if you are able to quickly identify this gap and implement them, we don't need to be getting to the point of conducting an interaction review, which is usually conducted maybe within 3 months if you are unable to control the outbreak, or more than that, if you have an outbreak extending to up to like 1 year. We don't want that again because of the attendant mobility and mortality that come with this. So if you're able to actually imbibe the culture or the spirit of prioritizing early action review, I believe that the gaps that we identify, when we address them, we should be able to reduce the response time so that we also minimize the morbidity and mortality. We don't want any deaths, and we don't want people to, we want to limit the spread of this outbreak. So that's for the EAR. For the interaction review, like I said, this can be done anytime, especially when the outbreak is becoming chronic, like more than 3 months. We want to also take stock and see what we are doing well, what we are not doing well, and see how we can come up with an improvement plan. And for the after-action review, all these are taking place within the period when we are responding to an emergency. When we have declared an outbreak over, let's say you are no longer recording cases, or we don't have mobility again, that's for the after-action review. And this is usually conducted within the 3 months after you have declared an outbreak over, so that you can be able to also take stock of what you have done well, what the best practices and also the gaps, and also implement the improvement plan that will be developed based on consensus. And of course, that's for the after-action review. And the after-action review that you are conducting is part of the preparedness again, because you are now shifting from the response mode to the preparedness mode after the outbreak has been declared for. And the expectation is that you develop an improvement plan, which can also be integrated into your annual operational plan for those that cannot be implemented immediately. And of course, they can also be transferred to your national action plan for security, which I believe that most of us are now developing following the conduct of your JEE. So at the end of the day, they all link to one another. And what we should take home from this important infographic is that whether you are looking at the CMEX, the IHR or AR, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to assess and strengthen the functional capacities of your country to prevent, prepare, detect, notify, and respond to the public health emergency. And at the end of the day, you want to advance your health security. Next slide. Let me wrap up. In summary, if you look at these different components of the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework, as I described earlier, you want to see that you can see the different qualities or the different attributes of each of them, starting from the state party annual reporting, which is done every year. Annually is a quantitative, of course, review of the capacity. and it's mandatory, like I said. It monitors progress towards implementation of the IHR core capacities. Going to the after action review, it also assesses the functionality of your system, of your capacities during a new event. We are actually responding to emergency, but at the end of the day, when you have declared the outbreak over, you want to conduct a quick review. It's voluntary, and of course, it's done within 3 months, like I said earlier on. For the CMEX, it's also look at the capacity, functional capacity, and it's done, of course, during the preparedness phase. And it's strongly recommended that we actually imbibe the culture of conducting this from time to time. But for the JE, of course, it's done every 4 to 5 years. And the expectation is that we want to evaluate objectively all those, the implementation of the IHR core capacities by bringing a team of subject matter experts from outside the country to evaluate, to assess peer-to-peer kind of review of what is actually happening. And it's also a kind of quantitative assessment. Next slide, if this is not the last slide. So I want to appreciate you for your attention. And I believe that you may have 1 or 2 questions to ask regarding this important presentation. Please, like I said, please let's put our question in the Q&A session so that we can, the feature on your screen, so that we can begin to respond to your concerns. So thank you. Before we proceed, I would like to call on Dr. Anderson Latz, who is also a citizen expert, to take on the next presentation. Dr. Amarachi, please kindly project the next presentation, which is going to be on the progress. We want to look at the progress of IHR implementation in the WHO African region, started from 2019 to 2023. So it's going to be giving us a lot of important statistics so that we have a better understanding of where we are coming from, and of course, as at 2023, where we are, and of course, the next steps. On this note, I would like to call on Dr. Anderson to take the floor. Dr. Anderson, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kola, for this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon once again. Yes, I'm going to take us through the progress of IHR implementation in the African region using data from the state party annual reporting, which is one of the 4 components of the IHR monitoring and evaluation. Next, please. So as a way of background, the Article 54 of the IHR requests state parties and the WHO Director General to report to the World Health Assembly on the implementation of the regulations. So it was agreed that to do so, we use what we call the state party annual reporting. So this decision was made specifically in 2008 during the Assembly, and reiterated in 2018 with the resolution 71.15 of the World Health Assembly, which confirmed that state parties and the DG shall continue to report annually to the World Health Assembly on the implementation of the IHR using the self-assessment annual reporting tool. So by providing this report, using this tool, it allows WHO Secretariat to compile a consistent report to the World Health Assembly. Please note that we are currently using the 2nd edition of this tool, and this current edition has 15 capacities and 35 indicators. The first edition had 13 capacities and 24 indicators. So as you can see, we added two more capacities were added. So I'll come to it. Next, please. So the tool in use has 15 capacities, as I said. This is the list of capacities starting from policy, legal, and normative instruments to implement IHR. We have IHR coordination and national IHR focal point, financing, laboratory, surveillance, human resources, health emergency management, health service provision, IPC, RCC, point of entry, and border health, zoonotic diseases, food safety, chemical events, and radiation emergencies. These are the list of the 15 capacities in the second edition of the State Party Annual Reporting Tool. Next, please. So this slide just shows the average score recorded in the WHO African region from 2019 up to 2023. So what can we say? As you can see, the score gradually increased, from 44% up to 50, with the highest score recorded in 2022. In the legend, we have 5 levels. When you score less than 20, it's level 1. Between 20 and 40% is 2. 41 to 60% is 3. 61 to 80 is level 4. And the highest is over 80%. So as you can see, in 2019, 2020, we have one country respectively that recorded the lowest. And this, there have been some improvements. No more red starting 2021, which illustrate that countries with support from WHO and partners have trying to improve on the implementation of the IHR core capacities. Next slide, please. So this one shows the trend of the scoring, the number of countries from 2019, 2023. As I mentioned, the first 2 years, one country in each of the year recorded less than 20%. And then looking at the level 2, which ranges from 20 to 40%, we started with 20 countries in 2019, and it went down to 14, then 11, dropped to 7, and went up to 12. So generally speaking, as you can see, since it's one of the lowest, the second lowest score, so this drop showed that the number of countries have low capacity, I would say, has improved. So when you look at the yellow one, the yellow bar, which is the level between 41 and 60%, it's evolved from 19 countries in 2019 to 22 countries in 2020, then 21 in 2021, 31 in 2022, and 24 countries in 2023. So looking at the green, there is slight improvement. Green being, score between 61 and 80%. 7 countries in 2019, 10 in 2020, 10. The following country is 7, and then 8 in 2022, and 11 countries record with this score in 2023. So as you can see, in 2022, we have 1 country that recorded the highest score. So generally speaking, countries are doing well, but still we have some work to do to ensure that all core capacities are fully functional. Next, please. So this is the average score per capacity. Like I mentioned, we have 15 capacities. For policy, legal, and normative instrument to implement IHR, as you can see, it started for the first 2 years with level 3 and dropped to level 2 in the remaining 3 years, which are 2021, 2022, 2023. For IHR coordination, national IHR focal points, function and advocacy, it's remains level 3 throughout the 5 years. For financing, financing was added to following the revision of the tool as I would say a new capacity. It was part of the policy, legal, and normative instruments before. So it stands now on its own. And just to mention that this revision was based on lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. So countries started reporting specifically on financing from 2021 when the second edition was developed. So financing, it went up from 47%, went up progressively to 52%. This is quite encouraging still, countries and partners need to do more. As for lab, we started with level 3 first year, and the subsequent 3 years went up to level 4 and dropped in 2023 to level 2. I think one of the most encouraging capacities is surveillance. As you can see, we have invested a lot in surveillance, which is good. With 2019 with level 4, 61%, it went up gradually up to 71% in 2023. So HR, is stagnates between 43 and 52% for the 4 years. Level 3. Health emergency management, we started level 2. 40% 2019, went up gradually up to 58% with level 3. Health service provision, if you see first 3 years is level 3, and in 2022-2023, it has improved, going up to level 4. These are some of the, I will say, advantage of lesson learned from COVID-19, where we emphasize some of the critical capacities, including health service provision. Next, please. And this will be my last slides. For IPC, as you know, IPC was also added to the second edition from 2021, and the score of IPC is level 3. Ranges around 46%. RCC started with 44%, went up to around 60% in the third and fifth year. POEs, some work to be done still, despite some slight improvement, starting with level 1, which is 37%, went up, going up to 49% in 2023. Zoonotic diseases, issues of, how do we integrate One Health in whatever we're doing, from 51% up to 56% in 2023. So zoonotic diseases is level 3, and food safety is around 47% throughout, which is level 3. Chemical events and radiation, as you can see, all around 30 to 40%. I think these are areas where we need to invest more, given the threat caused by these important capacities. So, colleagues, I think these are the few slides I wanted to share in regard to IHR implementation in the WHO African region. I would like also to conclude saying that congratulations to countries for the past 5 years for the submission. We have able to achieve 100% submission rates, and each year the countries are expected to report, like I mentioned, but the deadline for submission is end of February, 28th February each year. And in the African region, I think most of countries have already submitted their report, apart from the remaining 5 countries which we are following up with the leadership of colleague Michael, who is part of the panelists. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson, for that great presentation. From his presentation, we have been able to see the evolution, the improvements of the findings in terms of the implementation of IHR, especially across different capacities since 2019 up to 2023. And we all know where we are in our respective countries. And this expectation is that we should continue to improve on some of these core capacities so that we're able to strengthen our health system. So thank you so much. Again, we have started responding to some of your questions. Dr. Lad just presented his own session. So if colleagues online, if you still have any question, please do not hesitate to actually put it in the Q&A feature on your screen. So thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. So because of time, we will quickly go to the next presentation, which will be taken by Dr. Michael on 2024 amendments to the IHR 2005. And I believe that this is what most of us have been waiting for. So Dr. Michael, please, we would like to hear from you. What are those changes that have been made? And I believe that this is one area that colleagues will be interested in. Over to you, Dr. Michael.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Kola, and yourself and Dr. Lat giving some further information or insight as to what IHR is. And we were able to build a story till now. We can't tell you what amendments have taken place when we've not refreshed you as to what the IHR, the existing one, indeed is. We may be saying this with some, a little bit of disclaimer here and there, all because it's yet to indeed come into force. So we'll be having our discussions with that at the back of our mind. But nevertheless, it's something that is on the horizon, and we need to start letting colleagues in the region know to what it entails. And definitely there are some expectations that we want to see from countries, and the very reason that we are having this webinar, or let me say one of the reasons. So the IHR 2005 we just discussed has seen remarkable amendments. If you want to look in the past, that may be comparable to what happened in 2005 and came into force in 2007, and largely informed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, a lot of countries definitely had its fair share of this pandemic. So these experiences led to the executive board of WHO urging member states to take appropriate measures to consider potential amendments to the IHR. Because the IHR basically is the framework, the legal framework that all countries look up to ensure that international health security is assured. So member states had to look at two concurrent reform processes, not only the IHR amendments, because people realize, or countries, stakeholders realize that the IHR then, or the IHR as it is now, 2005, couldn't respond favorably, for want of a better word, to all the elements that the pandemic posed to us. And in furtherance, they also realized there will be the need for a separate framework, which I will shorten to call the pandemic treaty, that also need to coexist, that is alongside the revised or amended IHR. And there is a colleague on board a panelist who is going to shed some light on the aspect to do with the pandemic treaty. But let me just move quickly to the point where come June 2024, that's the 1st June 2024, at the 77th World Health Assembly, the amendment process for the international health regulations saw the light of day. Member states, or states parties, so to speak, approved of it, accepted it on consensus basis. That's to say there was basically no voting for it. It also went through some processes. That's a little bit of background, and then we'll start delving into what indeed the amendments were. Committees were put in place to ensure that the processes were very transparent, very inclusive, and definitely addressed what each country wanted. We had a working group on IHR reviewing the proposals that were obtained from countries. But before then, these independent panels, that's the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, the IHR Review Committee. Remember I told you the Review Committee basically looks at how well the regulations, the IHR regulations are are performing. And they also had the Independent Oversight Advisory Committee and quite a number of others coming to look at what it really takes to ensure that the existing IHR, the reviews are done. It was thought together to also, alongside establishing a pandemic treaty, but I'm focusing more on the IHR with this particular slide. So these were passed over to the Working Group on Strengthening WHO Preparedness and Response to Health Emergencies. The Working Group also did it very well, and then passed it on to the Working Group, that's Member States Working Group on IHR. This is where all the proposals from countries were received and were really looked through thoroughly before proceeding with the amendment process. And it was done under the World Health Assembly special session in 2001. And come the World Health Assembly 2022, the Working Group on IHR was established fully to commence its work. So the process, the review committee reports, they came out looking at the proposals, they came out reading of the proposed amendment. The Working Group IHR, with the support of the Bureau, now presents the amended articles text by text to the various sessions that took place, in ensuring that the amendment saw the light of day in June 2024. Areas for which proposals for amendments were submitted. These may not be too legible for some of you, but then we had 11 broad areas towing the line of the IHR itself. The notification and verification areas, quite a number of amendments or proposals were made there. And the health measures, health document points of entry, 54 proposed amendments were there. Core capacities, implementation of the IHR, final provisions, responsible. So it cuts across the whole IHR, and we can present an overview in this form where we had, looking at the existing documents, we have 66 articles in total in the existing IHR. And 33 of those articles saw some kind of amendments. And if you want to delve deeper, we had a number of 307 proposed amendments in those 33 articles. We also have 9 annexes. 6 of them saw various proposals being made. And opportunity was also taken to introduce new articles or new statutes altogether, where we had 6 new articles being introduced and also 2 new annexes. So I must say the various proposals culminated in a little over half of the existing articles seeing some kind of amendments being proposed, and most of them went ahead to see some changes also being made. So I tried to, this slide tries to look at the story, the chronology of the 2024 amendment, beginning all the way from January 2022. This was the heat of the COVID pandemic. And I dare say anytime that there's a public health emergency, at least we should be thinking what good can come out of it. And then we can't say that this has led to the revision of the IHR 2022 amendments being made. At least we can count on that as one of the offshoots of the COVID pandemic. So let's look at this slide. And it's a summary of our 2024, what do you call it, amendment that were made on the IHR 2005. Key new amendments. We now have in place the National IHR Authority being established, or need for it to be established. As part of the review committee reports, which I did not present because of time and the in-depth that it may require, it observed that our various or respective IHR NFPs were not well positioned to ensure the full implementation of the IHR. Because of the location, they didn't wield too much authority, and they saw that as a gap. And the thinkers or the good people of the day who attended those sessions, member states, our own people, thought it good that we need to establish a national IHR authority, which will either coexist with the IHR NFP, or we can decide to have one institution which will embody the functions of the national IHR authority, as well as the existing national IHR NFP. So this is one key element that we expect countries to start working towards. And you appreciate why I'm beginning to make such pronouncement, because if at a certain point we do not indicate our reservations or rejections, what it means is that we will be bound by the IHR 2005 amendments come 19 September 2025. We will get to those areas quite soon. And they also now have a very interesting feature or definition, which is pandemic emergency. I'm sure in the minds of all of us, we saw public health emergency of international concern to be the epitome of public health emergencies, and that should let the whole world be running helter-skelter, which is still true. But with time, with the operationalization of the IHR, it gradually, and especially the COVID pandemic, we realized that not all public health emergencies of international concern may give us that experience we do not desire, that the COVID pandemic gave us. And therefore, much as both may be fake, it will be very good to give a special dispensation to what it means for a public health emergency to be elevated or described as what a pandemic emergency. Because when you have a pandemic being caused by a biological agent, it gives a different scenario. You can have a public health emergency, which will be a chemical spillage at the backyard of a certain shoreline. Yes, it's something that nobody wants. Environmental pollution, it has its effects on marine life, tourism. But then the whole world will not run helter-skelter. So even that being a fake. Okay, so connoisseurs of the day thought that we need to introduce pandemic emergency. We define it, and when it comes to the DG, the processes that the DG takes to declare a public health emergency, same processes or similar processes have been outlined in the amended IHR for DG to also declare a pandemic emergency. There is also some new terminologies that feature, and these are not standalone articles that you can go and say, go to article 35, you go and see solidarity and equity. No, it's not like that. But we have solidarity be understood as fundamental principle in international treaties, emphasizing cooperation, mutual support, and shared responsibilities. And we also have equity, which is looking at principles of fairness, justice in the application of what the pandemic, the application of the amended articles or the IHR. So this solidarity and equity are issues that have been imbibed in all, especially in all the amended articles, the new insertions. And it's something that we want reflected, because if you want the IHR to function optimally during a pandemic or during a health emergency, solidarity, equity. Having mentioned equity, let me just give you a quick example on how vaccines were being stored in certain countries, whereas other countries needed it most. Okay, whether there was fairness in those transactions. Going deeper into this will also call for another time, but let me for now focusing on the new amendments. I just mentioned that as an example. So we have strengthened access to relevant health products, which is Annex 13 and 14 for you, and then establishing coordinating financial mechanism. And all these are clearly expenses from SPA, where certain health are always, you may not be able to, so resources in terms of money, you may not be able to even access these products. So these articles try to make sure that there is some equity in there. And we also have establishment of coordinating financial mechanisms. It wasn't there. So these are funds that are established to support countries in implementing the IHR. If it's in there as part of the regulations, the thinking is somehow countries will also have not easy access, but have access to it when it's so merited. In this day of technology, the new IHR is thinking not to only rely on only hard paper documents, but where feasible, the IHR transactions or interactions, activities should also be able to rely on digital documents. And that's why we have the Article 35 and Annex 6. There's also another institution that has been established, is worth taking note of, which is the States Parties Committee. However, this is operating more at a global level, where among countries, these state party committees will sit and see how IHR is being implemented. This differs from the National IHR Authority, which is more of seeing to the implementation of IHR within countries, and of course, may have linkages with other countries. But seeing to the IHR implementation generally will be the work of the States Parties Committee. We've still not forgotten that state party has the responsibility to develop, strengthen, and maintain the capacity that are there. Some other amendments, if you look at the IHR 2024 amended IHR, the definitions we have new comers on board. The National IHR Authority has been defined. Pandemic emergency, which is a very key terminology now, it's also been defined. The relevant health products, what are they? They've also been defined in there. These are just examples. That's giving you this. Don't forget, we had over 300 amendments, but we are giving you the very key ones that is worth taking note of. There were also some sections which didn't emphasize the terminology prepare. It only starts from prevent, detect, respond, and all that. But it saw the need to now add prepare in some of those areas. And Article 2 is there, for instance, for you to take note of. And promotion of equity and solidarity, I mentioned it, is something that we want to see being eschewed in all the articles in this operationalization. Core capacities to prevent, I mentioned it earlier, public health response, including equitable access, also being stressed here. And I'm sure most of us thought the word or the terminology quarantine is now archaic or outmoded, but Article 27 has included it. We had only isolation in there, but quarantine as a measure has been included. And the last point we have here is maritime amended to ship, the Maritime Declaration of Health. But then what happened was, if you say maritime, that is too wide, that is too broad, like saying aviation declaration of health. It doesn't mean much. But when it comes to the aviation sector, we have aircraft declaration of health. So that lesson was borrowed, and therefore the maritime was also changed to ship declaration of health, and that's also in Article 37. Let me hurry up with the subsequent slides, once again, because of time. So the WHO, the DG, ensured that the amended articles were translated to the various languages, and by 17th July, that was done. And the DG came out on 19th September 2024. In fact, we've seen that time is drawing close, so we need to make sure that we alert countries, we educate countries, we inform countries as to what transpired. We have coming into force after notification, that is DG's notification being on the 19th September. For most countries, we have 10 months to express any reservation concerning amendments. And that 10 months falls on 19th July 2025. You may have a rejection, which you will do outright, that, oh, I reject, we were part of the consensus building, but then with hindsight, looking at my country, in-country regulations, I do reject. And this is something you have to write to the DG to explain why you are rejecting. If you have reservations, you may decide not to reject, but you may have reservations, okay? Whichever, you need to express that before the 19th September. After, sorry, 19th July. After 19th July, we have only 2 months for the entry into force of the amendments. You can see that we have 2 sets of countries. These countries that we have 18 months. In 2022, when the amendments of the IHR, for any time there's a new amendment, the period for it to come into force, when it was changed from 2 years to 1 year, these countries decided that they were going to reject that because it kind of connoted some imposition on them. So they objected. For these countries, they have a full span of 24 months for the entry into force of these regulations. For them, that is the IHR. But for the rest of us, and of course the whole of Afro, we have up to 19th September 2025 for it to come into force, because there is no objection from. So implementation, the amended articles somehow has to go through some domestication at each country. There are some few countries that deal with the duality.
Michael, please try and wrap up because of time.
Okay, thank you. There are some few countries who deal with the dualist system, where the dualists mean after entering into force or entering into a global treaty, they have to now come home or in country and domesticate it. The monists will have the global treaty working or being something which can be applied without any further domestication. So we have these 2 systems that we need to put in place, and it's up to us to know very well what exists in our country. We have to provide further, for WHO, we are there to provide further support. We'll continue providing the advocacy. We'll continue working at all the various levels to make sure that each country is very comfortable when it comes to 19th September 2025. So expectations going forward, we expect the state party to notify the DG of any rejections. I've said that already. And you need to make any declaration in case your in-house legislations are not able to accommodate the 2024 amended IHR. And that should be done by 19th July 2025. We also have to establish our national IHR authority and provide the contact details to WHO, because after 19th September 2025, the whole world would have transitioned, and then we need to transition globally as well. And we have roadmap here. I've mentioned them along the line, and we are going to stress it on the next steps. I'll skip this for now. But just to say that we have some follow-up actions. WHO Afro has its own. We'll be sending some survey tools to you just to monitor the progress of your domestication process. And you also give us the needed information per the various timelines. But all we want to say by ending this presentation is that if we are not able to domesticate, or if you're a dualist country where you need to domesticate before it comes into force, if you are not able to do so, and 19th September 2025 comes, in as much as you have not been able to domesticate, what it means is that you are bound by the IHR 2005, the amended document, amended regulations. So at that stage, we may not be able to use our internal legislative processes as an excuse. For those who don't need internal domestication, you can please proceed and make sure that what is expected of us is put in place. So let's all remember, we all form part of the States Party. and the amendments were done by consensus. If we are planning to reject any of the amendments, then if we don't have plans to reject any of the amendments, then we should be seen to be addressing the required follow-up actions. On that note, I would like to thank you for your
Thank you.
audience.
Thank you, Dr. Michael, for that important presentation. And I believe that we have all learned one or two things from this amendment made to the existing regulation. Of course, I don't want to, because of time, the next, and you can see that it's a very rigorous process, given all the trajectory of what has happened from 2022 up to last year, when it was finalized, although we are still awaiting contributions from countries in terms of acceptance or rejection of some of these amendments. So without much ado, I will quickly call on the next presenter in the person of Pearl to take us through the progress of the pandemic treaty negotiation. And I think this is also an important area, which I believe we can all learn from. Pearl, please kindly take us through this session as we listen to you. Over to you, Pearl.
Thank you, Dr. Kola, and thank you to all the panelists. My name is Pearl Kovienje. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm the Emergency Preparedness Project Officer working with the WHO Afro Office for East and Southern Africa, based in Nairobi, Kenya. So as we've heard from the previous panelists, we've heard of the significance that IHR plays in ensuring global health security. However, COVID-19 caught us unprepared and unaware and revealed significant gaps in several areas, including gaps related to access to pandemic-related health products, as well as weaknesses in general weaknesses in the governance mechanism and in the global health governance structures as well. So this led to the realization of the need to implement a new but complementary international legal instrument spearheaded by the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body. And this is comprised of the member states of the World Health Organization. And they were mandated, and still mandated actually, to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement, and other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, with a view to adoption under Article 19, which enables the World Health Assembly to establish any legally binding convention on health-related issues, or under any other provisions of the WHO Constitution, as may be deemed appropriate by the INB. Next slide, please. So here there's just a timeline, although not with all the activities, because several activities have taken place between 2022 and the 13th session of the INB, where we are now. So we have undergone a vigorous process of drafting and revising the treaty right from 2022 up to where we are now. And though there was a lot of political will and motivation from the member states, in May 2024, when we were meant to finalize the pandemic treaty and adopt it, the INB mandate was extended to this year, May, during the 78th session of the World Health Assembly. And that was due to significant agreements that remained amongst the member states. In addition, WHO Afro has supported the WHO Afro member states with several processes and activities. And this includes high-level ministerial briefings to try and gain a way forward, and to also brief ministers on the negotiations that are taking place, as well as the progress and the challenges. There have also been retreats for experts, multi-sectoral experts from different backgrounds, to open up these contentious articles, see and discuss what each article means, what the implications are for the African region, as well as the challenges, and find a way forward for the continent, for the Afro region. There has also been the high-level African Parliamentary Conference in Accra, Ghana, and that was in November 2023. And that convened African policymakers, lawmakers, in order again to find a common African position and a way forward, as well as to strengthen and refine the Afro position within the negotiations. Additionally, there was the UN High-Level Declaration on Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness and Response. That was during the UN General Assembly in September 2023. Again, that was to reinforce the global commitment towards pandemic preparedness. Next slide, please. So as I've earlier stated, the INB has undergone a significant process right from the identification of substantive elements, and this was where they were identifying the key articles that need to be discussed, what is aligned with the IHR, what is not aligned, and what to continue debating in order to make it more appropriate towards ensuring that countries are prepared to respond to such pandemics. Right through to the negotiating text and the revised negotiating text that continues to be revised as we go through the subsequent INB sessions. Next slide, please. So I will briefly go through the articles, the contentious articles, and the key issues surrounding these articles. So we'll begin with Article 4 on pandemic prevention and surveillance. There are some member states that are arguing for binding commitments, and therefore for this article to be embedded within the main body of the treaty in order to avoid any unnecessary duplications of IHR provisions, but also to avoid any financial and technical burdens on lower resourced member states. Whilst there are other member states who prefer more flexibility in implementation and would rather have this article in the form of an annex. Secondly, there's Article 9 on research and development. So there still remains some unresolved debates over how these R&D outputs should be shared. And these R&D outputs include intellectual property rights, clinical trial data and findings, patents, as well as medical countermeasures and others. On Article 11 on transfer of technology and know-how, here there is a need to create a delicate balance between IP protections and global equity. So still there is the debate over whether this article should be legally binding or whether there should be voluntary technology transfer. On Article 12 on pathogen access and benefit sharing, again, there is the debate over whether this should be binding or voluntary. Those member states who argue for this particular article to be binding, the reasons behind that are because they want fair exchange of pathogen samples and equitable benefit sharing. They also want to avoid any exploitation of lower resourced member states or any overcompensation as well of these lower resourced member states. Next slide, please. On Article 13 on supply chain and logistics, this is over the issue of no-fault compensation mechanisms, which ensures that people injured by any vaccine or treatment receive fair compensation quickly without needing to prove blame or to file lawsuits. So again, some member states prefer that a global no-fault compensation mechanism be established to avoid any legal barriers, while other member states prefer for this compensation mechanism to be established at the national level to avoid any financial or legal complexities. Additionally, the other key issue on this article is related to the establishment of the global supply chain and logistics network. to ensure timely, equitable, and unimpeded access to pandemic-related health products. So while some member states support the principle of global coordination, they still want to maintain some flexibility and to still protect private sector interests, whilst others still want stronger protections and insist against inequitable distribution. On Article 20 on sustainable financing, here some member states prefer pandemic financing to function within the existing coordinating financing mechanism under the amended IHR, and for funding to remain more in the form of concessional loans rather than grants-based financing, whilst other member states prefer for there to be long-term financial commitments and for this financing mechanism to be independent and for it to commit itself more to grants-based, to be more grants-based rather than debt-based. On Article 21, on the Conference of Parties, this is a governing body that will be responsible for overseeing compliance, implementation, and future amendments of the pandemic treaty once it is adopted. So some prefer for this governing body to remain within the WHO and aligned within the WHO, aligned with the WHO under Article 19 of the WHO Constitution, whilst others think that this COP or Conference of the Parties should be independent from WHO's structures with its own decision-making authority. And finally, on Article 22 on the right to vote, some member states propose that only sovereign states should have the voting power to prevent regional blocs from dominating any sort of decision-making authority, decision-making roles, whilst other member states prefer to vote as regional blocs. Next slide, please. So we can clearly see that time is of the essence, and there is no pandemic that waits for us. There is a threat that we may find ourselves in the middle of another pandemic unprepared, and that will create severe consequences globally. So there is a need for urgent attention and action and commitment from all stakeholders, not just member states. So the first thing we need to keep in our minds constantly is the fact that global health security is a shared responsibility. Therefore, there is need for a collective action. There's a need for all hands on deck to ensure that we finalize this treaty and ensure that there is consensus on these contentious articles that are currently being discussed. Number two, there is need for active and meaningful participation of experts. And these experts are from different fields, with medical backgrounds, scientific, from the policy background, from the civil society space. So there is a need for them to engage in robust and meaningful engagement in dialogue, as well as a need for there to be an ongoing feedback input loop throughout the treaty drafting process in order to refine and strengthen this common African position. Thirdly, there is a need for flexibility and adaptability in these treaty negotiations. We need to keep in mind that this treaty needs to have equity-based mechanisms embedded within it. Because again, like I said before, there are some lower resourced member states that do not have access to essential pandemic-related health products. And we saw how they suffered during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there is a need to find that delicate balance between respecting national sovereignty and ensuring that there is strong international collaboration amongst all the member states of the WHO. And lastly, there is a need for sustainable and rapid financing that is transparent, that is free from political constraints, and that focuses solely on public health needs in order to ensure timely response efforts. Next slide, please. However, we have noticed that there are some challenges that continue to stall our efforts towards finalizing this pandemic treaty. Number one, there is a lack of flexibility of some member states to shift their position on IP-related issues, intellectual property-related issues, and pathogen access and benefit sharing-related issues, PABS issues. Some member states are still insisting on strong IP protections, whilst other member states are really pushing for mandatory technology transfer and equitable benefit sharing. And unfortunately, this has led to a divergence amongst some member states, African member states, on some of these contentious articles. Secondly, there is fatigue. Like I said before, the INB negotiations were extended by a year from May 2024 to May 2025. And we are hoping that they will be finalized by the time the World Health Assembly comes along. So the longer we continue to negotiate, the higher the risk that there may be additional factions between member states, but also within regional blocs. And lastly, there are geopolitical factors and tensions, and this includes geopolitical conflicts that are currently taking place, economic instability in several of the member states, as well as some member states that continue to prioritize economic and trade-related considerations above what the main goal should be, which is ensuring global health security before another pandemic hits. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? Number one, there is a need for updated data to assist negotiators with empirical evidence. And this can include empirical evidence on pandemic trends and preparedness levels amongst member states. It can also include empirical evidence on economic impact analysis, on pandemics, and on the cost of inaction. Secondly, there is a need for capacity building of country representatives. And this can include negotiation skills to strengthen the African regional position, as well as technical and legal knowledge on treaty provisions, treaty implications, and compliance requirements of member states. And lastly, there is a need to update higher authorities. So these include the high-level decision makers, the ministries of health, ministries of agriculture, and other line ministries, heads of state, parliamentarians, ministers, on the progress and the challenges of the negotiations that are currently taking place in order to leverage support, and also the fact that political will and support is essential in ensuring that we finalize this treaty to push our priorities through, and that we are still able to be recognized and still able to participate and engage actively within these negotiations. Thank you very much. I believe that is the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pearl, for patiently taking us through the pandemic treaty negotiation. And I think it's so rich in terms of the insight that you have provided. And I believe that we have taken note of some of those important areas of contention, which you have highlighted, especially across 8 articles from your presentation. So thank you very much. And again, we have, of course, roles to play as IHR NFP in our respective countries, to ensure that we address some of these pending or these areas of contention so that we can move forward. So thank you so much. So on these points, I think you have gone through all the different sessions as regard IHR amendments and also the areas of pandemic treaty negotiation. So it's time for questions and answers. And before we proceed to that, I would like to recognize the presence of our team lead, Dr. Miriam Nayunja, on the call. Thanks for joining. And we are going to start with the question and answers. But before that, I don't know if Dr. Miriam, if you have any comments, because we have presented all the sessions, and Dr. Lat is supposed to coordinate this question and answer sessions. Dr. Miriam, do you have any comments so far before we quickly move to the questions and answer session?
No, colleagues, not much. Please let's hear from the colleagues to see if they have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you. I know that we have provided answers to or responses to some of the questions in the Q&A box. Dr. Lat will quickly take us through some of these concerns or questions raised by by colleagues online. And again, after that, if there are any additional questions from colleagues, kindly flag this by raising your hand so that we can also address these questions. Over to you, Dr. Lat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kola. Welcome, Miriam, to this webinar. I think we have received some questions in the Q&A session. So all of the questions have been responded to. We had questions from IHR too, from Conde, from Lydia. So we have responded to all the questions that were posted in the Q&A caption. So so far there is no written question. So let's hear from the colleagues if they have any question. Anyone has a question can raise his hand and take the floor.
Maybe in the next 2 minutes or so, you may want to read through some of those concerns. I know that they're already provided in the Q&A box there. So maybe you can just go through it briefly, very briefly. I know that somebody asked questions around the IHR, if we have to also do it again for other emergencies, given that we have already conducted IHR for COVID, and the response is clear that, of course, you can conduct IHR for other emergencies, especially when they extend up to 3 months. It's becoming chronic. You can quickly take stock of what you have done well and what you have not, other areas that may require improvement, so that you can adjust your response to control the outbreak. Somebody also has a question around JE, within the context of One Health. And this is what we normally do anyway. It's a multi-sectorial from start to finish. And this has also been responded to. I don't know if there are any other questions. Colleagues, you can check the Q&A box there so that you are able to pick what questions.
Kola, maybe I could add on the JEE question. The officer is asking about JEE and how does it work in between the outbreaks, the One Health collaboration to minimize future outbreaks. I think that JEE assesses the capacities in country between the different sectors, animal human environment, and it brings out strengths and weaknesses that need to be addressed. When we face outbreaks, like currently we are facing Ebola in Uganda, we know that Ebola is a zoonotic disease. Usually you have a pillar. We call it ecological pillar in some countries, they call it zoonotic, others they call it One Health. But you have that pillar that studies like the relationship, where did the outbreak come from, where did the man interact with the animals, and then in between, they try to work on some of those findings to minimize future outbreaks. They also try to work on the other capacities that are needed under IHR to minimize outbreaks, but it requires One Health collaboration between the 3 different sectors to address the gaps that exist. I hope that that adds a bit on what Kola has written in the answer. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam, for that additional useful information that you have provided. As Dr. Lat rightly mentioned, do we have any other questions, any other comments by our colleagues online, so that we can quickly clarify before we move to the next steps?
Okay, thank you. If I may come in, just to, there was a question on whether the presentations will be shared. I think it's a question from Lydia.
Of course. We are going to share with you the presentation so that you can also take time to look at some of the contents that we have presented to foster your understanding. So thank you so much. I can see that maybe there are not so many questions, and that means that I want to believe that the panelists, they have actually done justice to these topics, and I believe that we have been able to pick a lot when it comes to the issues around IHR amendment, and also some of the recent the areas of contentions around the pandemic treaty negotiation. So thank you so much. Quickly, we would like to go to the next steps in terms of wrapping up. Already you can see that we have a roadmap on the screen, roadmap for domestication of 2024 amended IHR 2005 by Afro member states. And you can see that by 19th of February, we expect that there's supposed to be an orientation on the amendment. Of course, this is being done already. This is why we're here. And on the 21st of February, countries develop and implement action plan, including establishing national IHR authority. I think this discussion should be ongoing already in the country to ensure that we also have this component as part of the structure for IHR implementation in the country. On the 24th of February, we also expect Afro to communicate to countries as WHO, to communicate to the ministries, including WHO country offices, on expected activities post 2024 amendment to IHR 2005. On the 28th of February, the Afro Secretariat is expected to send progress assessment to countries. And on the 20th, again, the same date, Afro will compile information on country implementation status, including monitoring mechanism will be instituted to document countries' readiness to implement the 2024 amendment IHR. This is also an important activity. By the 19th of July, as presented by my colleague, Dr. Michael, countries are expected to communicate any reservations, any rejections, or failure, and of course, failure to domesticate legislative and administrative arrangement to the DG of WHO, as stated in the Article 59, paragraph 3. So please note that any rejection or reservation received thereafter shall have no effect. Please, this is very important. So whatever we want to submit before this date, I think it's important for us to begin to discuss internally and push them forward. So before 19th of September 2025 this year, state parties should establish a national IHR authority. This is very, very important because as agreed by all member states, and also to provide WHO with contact details of the national IHR authority and their national IHR focal points. I know that the national IHR focal points from time to time, we continue to, update this list. It's not supposed to be an individual, but an office. So if there's any changes you want to make, please, before 19th of September, kindly forward such details to the Secretariat. And by 19th of September still, 2024 amendment IHR 2005 will come into force. Please, we need to really act fast and ensure that we meet as countries internally to ensure that we achieve all those actions. Thank you so much for your attention, and of course for asking questions. And this is what we expected before this session, that we are able to clarify some of these areas. So before I wrap up, I think this is the last statement from me. I would like to call on our team lead, Dr. Marian Ayunja, to give us a closing remarks. Over to you, Dr. Marian.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I put on my video. I don't know if you can see me. Thank you very much, colleagues. This orientation about IHR amendment is meant for the member states and partners to understand what is the expected action after all our ministers approved the IHR amendments. The actions that are required from WHO, the actions that are required from the member states at a ministerial level, but there are also actions that are required from the national focal points, or that need to be advocated for by the national focal points. For example, you see that the amendments are recommending that we move from just the national focal point to a national IHR authority. In different countries, this is different, can be instituted differently. Some need an act of parliament, some need an act of the minister, and different ways really that they can put this in place. And so there's need for discussions to initiate at this country level, driven by the national focal points on what this implies at their country level, and who will fund it, and which staff will be in this IHR National Authority. Will it be 100% for the authority, or would it be multi-sectoral staff, etc.? So there's work that as the country national focal point, you need to think through and guide on how these IHR implemented amendments will be implemented alongside the rest of the IHR. It is, you have seen from Anderson, the presentation on where we are regarding the IHR core capacities. I keep telling people that when the IHR 2005 came into force in 2007, we were expected by 2012 to have attained these capacities. They extended to 2014 and eventually 2016. But now we are in 2025, and still we have many reds, many yellows, and the percentage that is green and above is still 50% and less even in some countries. So I think that as we think of the amendments, we also have to think of what can we do really to make sure that we have these capacities in place, because if we have these capacities, we are better prepared for many of these emergencies when they come our way. So I think that as you think of how to domesticate the amendments, how to implement the amendments, start from the beginning, also think of how to build the capacities that are in red and green to achieve, rather red and yellow to achieve green and above. Green is you have the capacity, yellow it is rather above there. We want to have the sustained capacity. You have it, but you can sustain it. We saw in COVID that we built some of these capacities, genomic sequencing, I don't know, PCR, what, and then we were not able to maintain them. The ideal is to be able to build the capacity and then to maintain that capacity and have resilient health systems that can stand the test of time. We still have a lot of work in our hands, but I think our grandparents used to say that Rome was not built in one day. I don't know if they had seen Rome, but they used to say that Rome was not built in one day. And I think that we can continue being very positive, but working hard. And sooner than later, we should have this in place. I thank you all for attending. I think that you have picked a message or two. We are here in Nairobi, in Dakar, in Brazzaville, ready to support you whenever you have any question and if you need our support. Pearl has talked briefly about the pandemic accord. We request that you really convince your ministers, your negotiators, that they should put in all the efforts to make sure that we get a beneficial pandemic accord. We want a pandemic accord completed, but the negotiation should ensure that the Africans also are benefiting from this pandemic accord. I want to stop there and thank you very much for your participation. Presentations will be shared for you to keep revising and to present to your people at country level and to use as necessary. Best wishes for the rest of the afternoon. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.